Hello and welcome back to Parley. This one is about dogs from the future, paid for by FreeWilliam. Hope you'll enjoy listening. FreeWilliam simply asks, looking at how we've modified dogs from their original source wolf material, what sorts of dogs might we expect to see in the distant future? And this image of some wolf and dog breed skulls is attached. You can see that if you were not already familiar, some dog skull shapes are very similar to wolf skulls, and some of them have changed quite a bit. And I think that this is an interesting place to start because you sending this picture implies that you're interested in this line of inquiry to some extent, right? Like you sent me a picture of the shape of dog skulls with this question. So you could look at this question and say, it's pure memes, or you want to talk about generative AI and pets, which I'm going to talk about because I just want to talk about that, and I think it is pertinent. But you including this keys me in that I think the biological technology revolution and also evolution pressures changing are two things that we should cover. I will say that I probably wouldn't cover evolution pressures on my own. I think that's something it might be fun to kind of draw out in Parley more. Which things, if your prompt was more simple and had less details, which things might I not have covered, but then I did because you included this. I don't know, maybe that's worth. I'm worried that that's going to make people confounded by how unpredictable I can be, or maybe I'm not. Who knows? Anyway, dogs again, and how they're going to change going forward. Of course, the first part of the prompt I don't know much about. You said looking at how we've modified dogs from their original source wolf material. Like I knew that, but I don't know much about that topic. But of course, you know that. You've been doing Parley for longer than almost everybody else, so you know that I don't know those things. So that's fine. That being said, I do think it's worth thinking a little bit about the evolving needs and wants of humanity. Well, because one of those evolving needs is the need for companionship. I think this is a surprisingly complicated one. It isn't as simple as generative AI pets, therefore no more dogs. You know what I mean? It's not going to be like that, I don't think. At this moment in human history, people are having a bit of a tizzy, understandably so, about the impact of computer generated content. And I also think it's fair to say that people are in a little bit of a trouble about companionship. Let's actually review that situation a little bit. You know, a couple of years ago, it was four now, which is peculiar, we had the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was already a time when a lot of people were getting more distant from each other. A modern technological age where people didn't work with coworkers as much, or what have you. I don't know. I essentially never did that, so I don't really know what that's like. But you know, I went to college and then left. Now I kind of felt like at that time already when I was in college, one of the things I spent a lot of time and skipped classes doing was meeting people because I thought, wow, if I don't meet people that I, will enjoy being with for a long time, to get me started going into adulthood, I'm screwed because our society is broken and there is no good way to meet people. There's no sort of social occasion to meet people that don't like really need to meet people. And I think that has its own challenges, but at that point, that's not really this parlay anymore. I felt like you really needed a form of companionship. However, I don't really like pets that much. I don't like the practice of having pets because I think it's an insecurity on my part. I don't like the idea that people get so much control over another thing's life when I think it's easy to argue that most people really shouldn't have control over another thing's life. Maybe not even their own life, but that's not what we do here, and I live in the United States. So I don't know. I have always been a little uncomfortable with the idea of pets. I love animals though. Personally, I don't want a pet myself. But were I to be in the situation where my partner or my family, when they've had pets, I love animals to pieces, especially cats, which is a little awkward for this parlay, but you know. I have enjoyed the company of the dogs that I have been around too. Anyway, and I think that at that point, we were already, even without the generative AI thing and the COVID-19 pandemic, already there was this pressure to have some companionship. You know, I used to live in these apartments before COVID-19, and then I was away for a while and then came back because they're good apartments. And they're mostly 1 and 2 bedroom units, and there's not really that much stuff nearby. Like it's a bit away from the noise of the city that's nearby. So it's, you know, good if you want to get work done. And a lot of the people here are medical graduate students, but it's not like you're not going to have a social experience here in all likelihood. You know, not in particular. A lot of the people here have a dog, and they're what you can see of them having a social experience is them taking the dog for a walk, and they go inside. So that was sort of the stage. And then we got COVID-19, and then we got generative AI thing. What's going on? I think personally that if you were to see dog breeding and biological technology revolution, dog engineering, move dogs in a further direction by humans, you would expect it to be adapted to the home, mostly. And I'm also quite interested to see things like, I don't really know anything about dog breeds, but in cat breeding, for example, Mancoons are a very, very popular cat breed, but they have usually have a lot of health problems, like a lot of health problems. I feel like the biological technology moment is a good one for Mancoons. It's very believable that within our lifetimes, if you're around my age anyway, they probably won't be suffering through that stuff. We will probably be able to fix it, if you want to say it that way. A lot of heart disease, for example, I'm optimistic, maybe very optimistic, that will be fixed. I personally think a lot of people not thinking about, you know, what's going to happen when we just invent solutions to the cancer that I'm otherwise going to die of, and then we live a lot longer. What are we going to do with ourselves? I personally think it's a bit silly that people aren't thinking about that more, because there's really no point living your life unless you have a plan for what you do when things are like not immediately terrible. And I think that that is sort of the situation dogs have already been in for a while, right? Like in the past, dog ownership would have been a lot. It would have been you had a hunting dog, or there was a very significant security element to having your dog. They would make a lot of noise if people broke in or you got attacked or something. Going for a walk with a dog is in some ways a significant safety add, right? You can go out in an environment you might not be comfortable being alone in, or like in the woods or something, and you have a significant partner in that excursion, your dog. Cool. Still true, sure. That being said, my point is, I think that as that becomes even less true, and I think it will become less true, uh, we're going to hit a moment where that gets caught by the biological revolution. So to me, there isn't much of a question of evolution pressure, like natural evolution pressure. I feel like we're kind of going to head that off at this moment in society, where we would have almost completely overtaken any of the natural ones with just human ones. We're about at the point where we can just artificially engineer the human ones we want. So I'm not sure that there is speculating I feel like I can do. Like people will just make the dogs be however they want. I'm not sure I think that's good. Why wouldn't that be good? Oh, I don't know. I mean, a lot of ink has been spilled about the topic of, you know, why is it bad to, you know, have a pet if maybe the pet would have had such a bad time, like in the wild. That's a tricky thing. But then you could look at it the other way and say, well, you're forcing the pet to sort of deny its natural instincts. But are you? To what extent? It depends a lot on how you're keeping the pet. I don't know. As I said, this is a subject that I have had a lot of trouble with in my life. Like, the notion of pets, I really wish that humans just didn't keep pets. But there's so many benefits that's just kind of ridiculous to say that. I don't really mean it that way, you know. It just skeeves me out, and really, you could say that's a me problem. But I do also think other people have a problem, for sure. I don't know. I mean, here's a simple example. You could get the if I could bioengineer dogs, I would make it so they didn't feel the urge to do things they won't get to do in our urban environment. Is that good? But I think it is. I guess. I don't know. I guess my solution would be, well, we're here now though. We should eat less meat, but and this isn't relevant currently, but if someone were to suggest that we should eat literally no meat, there would be a question about, we do need the cows to have a place to be, unless we want to make cows extinct. So even though that really isn't relevant, it's totally disingenuous to act like that's a discussion about, sustainability right now. People aren't going to eat no meat in the foreseeable future, so it doesn't matter. But if we were at that point, there's for dogs, for example, where a lot of the dogs that we have are here as pets. It's like, well, it seems responsible to try to get the dogs to be in a situation where they're happier in their environment. I'm not really sure what to say about this weird. The reason I'm uncomfortable as we're talking about this, you help the dogs feel more comfortable being pets for humans. Like, good, right? But I'm uncomfortable because I don't like the feeling of authorship. I guess to me, the issue ultimately boils down to consent. And the problem with consent, in my opinion, is almost always that people being animals or human animals are not qualified to consent. You can't just ask for consent and then we're good. Fortunately, in the sexual communication area of human society, people have begun to understand that, I've noticed. You can't just ask for consent. There's a big difference between different kinds of consent. And I think my discomfort is that with animals, I feel like I'm required to violate the animal's consent to some extent. I have close friends that are veterinarians who have evidently needed to grapple with this themselves and gotten used to it, and I have great respect for that. People who care a lot about animals but have had to figure out, I need to make a decision on the behalf of this animal's well-being, but also the client is maybe being stingy or something, and veterinary work is hard and people should get paid more. But you get the point. We're getting a bit long-winded. The point I'm trying to make is that I think if it were up to me, I don't know what people want with pets. I understand some things about why people want pets, but I'm not really a good person to ask about having pets. But what I would do would be to get dogs to not have an irresistible urge to forage, for example. That seems like something, if I'm understanding correctly, that would make it less frustrating to not be able to get into stuff. Or when your dog kind of chews up the homework and then flops down, it's like, is the dog content or is the dog depressed because they can't destroy the homework? Because they want something they can do that with. They could not want that. I always bring these things back to humans. How many of the things that I spend my time pursuing in a day are things that I wouldn't want if it weren't for my current body? Or to put it a different way, how many of them could you change with only basic biological technology that could change my genome or even just my hormone balance? How many of those things would I stop wanting if you change that stuff? There's some that feel kind of obvious, like I would expect my sex drive to change. I don't know how. I don't think that it makes sense to assume that I would be completely disinterested in relationships or physical relationships, but that I would feel different about them is just obvious, I think. And it's the same thing. I think for dogs, for example, I'm fascinated in a way that isn't fair for dogs. They don't have to be the experimental subject for this. What dogs might want were you to alleviate the overwhelming instinctual concerns. Are you just they're going to go down to the next one? And that's not really how that works. You know what I mean? But that's the thing that pops into my head. I've talked a lot about dogs as pets. I think it's interesting to consider the dogs that will run away. Let's say that humans do migrate to having virtual companions nearly entirely, which I'm putting my money on they will not do that, by the way. I think that while it's going to be a huge societal issue, the way that generative AI displaces work, for example, I do also think people are slightly underestimating how much people will just kind of strong arm of what feels to them like a real, breathing physical person or animal companion, just for its own sake, like for no clear benefit, just because they feel disconcerted by the idea of not doing that. I think that will prove to be a stronger force than people expect. Or, like, to briefly indulge myself for a second, I'm not that worried about my own work because making videos on YouTube already isn't about doing them better or worse. That is irrelevant. So while you could, with some management, make a very directionless and mediocre channel with endless content on it using current generative AI, you can't make this specific content easily. And the whole point is, even if you did, it doesn't really remove the merit of one or the other, in my opinion anyway. The only problem is that there will be a lot more of it, right? The thing I'm making isn't less valuable, but it's just diluted by percent. There is much more percentage space taken up by things that are not me. I go from being 0.001% of the YouTubers or whatever to being 0.00001%, something like that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that thing is better in any meaningful way, because this already isn't a discussion about things being better. See also museums. I'm just going to leave that there. But yes, dogs. And so, yeah, let's say that people just abandon dogs. Yeah, occasionally you hear these interesting stories about dogs or cats. I said I'm super into cats, that are just living in the urban environment, but they're strays, but they have their own place. They have their own niche. They're not literally, they just ran away. There's a community of wild is kind of a weird word there, right? But dogs living in the urban human environment. And I don't know. Again, I don't really know about this subject, but it seems to me like that would go kind of well. I feel like that maybe could work okay. It doesn't seem to me like humans getting jettisoned from the human society, where there's a lot of things that we've done, like the ways our immune systems are nowadays, that I would imagine if I was just thrust into a totally different environment, I might not do so well. Whereas I don't know. I guess, like, have you seen what dogs eat? I feel like maybe that's okay. Again, this is the least scientific perspective you're ever going to get on this subject, but I don't know. But how are they going to change? I mean, you can tell. I have lots of thoughts about this subject, but I have no idea. I just know nothing about this. I can't say anything that has any scientific backing whatsoever about this subject. What sort of dogs? Well, you did say the distant future. I don't know. I mean, I guess you want me to imagine crazy, basically alien to us dogs. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, so we're just going off the rails with the science then. Tails. Why don't humans still have tails? Like, I kind of know from an evolutionary perspective, but if we could get them back, I don't know. I like if my feet were more dexterous, that's useful. I don't know. Again, I'm not really it's okay if you're into that, by the way. I'm not. I just like having more limbs. That seems good. That's cool. Dogs being able, and cats, again, cat person here, being able to use their tails as prehensile tails. That's not really a thing. But you could, why can't it be a thing? I don't know. You could do that. That just seems useful to me. It seems to me like, so people want their dog to be able to just talk. They want their dog to be a human companion, basically, I think. A lot of people. I don't. When I have been in the close company of cats for a long time, don't, well, I'm not disinterested. I don't hate that or anything, but I'm fine with the cats as they are. They're cool. They're very nice. They're smart in their own way too. I don't think everyone has to be or is better off if they are way smarter or whatever. But I think a lot of people want that, right? It's quite a common trope in fantasy and sci-fi, which is fantasy as well, where the dog has some kind of usually collar or helmet on, and the dog can talk, or like sometimes it's a backpack, or it's not the dog or the cat talking, but the a thing talks on behalf of the animal, you know? And I think that's what people want, don't you? And so the only real problem in my mind is that, let's say dogs get biologically engineered to have the same brains as humans, and we're hand waving all the science because I don't really know it, but I can think of a few problems already, but whatever. And then our government says, what are we going to do about the rights for the dogs? Well, the only problem, I guess, is that the dogs can't easily pick up stuff, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, if we're going that far in the future, can't they just have arms like a centaur, but a dog? But that's why I said prehensile tails. Can't I? It changes a lot if your cat or dog can just pick stuff up like a normal person. Or this is ridiculous, but I often think about crows or like other really smart birds. They do plenty of very intelligent stuff just with their beak. So what if they had a more useful appendage to do that stuff with? I don't know. And again, I already think humans are doing interesting things with this. I watched something recently about people adding a second thumb, just made of like 3D printed with a mechanism here. So it would be like their hand was, I'm trying to hide my other hand, but yeah, like that, right? And they could, control it by, I think it's like moving your toes or something. I forget exactly. I'm sure they've done it multiple ways. And so that's already a thing people are interested in. There's, again, just referencing my point before, there are many reasons why people might want a tail. For example, our monkey ancestors had tails and made good use of them. I don't know, seems useful to me. When you start trying to use your feet for more interesting things, even minor things, I don't know, that's useful. I could certainly use a fifth hand from time to time. I don't know. When I record, for example, some games don't like basically any hotkey that you're gonna set your recording thing to. And I just, more than it being a problem, though it has been a problem in the past, I just don't want to worry about the future proofing. So I have a foot pedal that you'd probably use for like a driving game or something, I guess is the intention. And you can set macros to it, and that is how I start recording. I hit the foot pedal so that I can take footage easily that just starts mid-action without having to edit it, without having to trim a little bit off, where I hit record, everything is just still and there's nothing going on, and then I start playing the game. I can easily have clips without needing to edit them or change them in any way that, begin in the middle and then end, that are, it's extremely easy to, when I set up this new computer, I could get it over easily. And I don't know, having a tail just to hit the stream deck would be helpful, okay? I'm just saying tails are useful. Tails are cool. But as someone who isn't but I am an animal enjoyer. I'm talking about the pet thing, I guess, but then I don't want to have non-human animal parts in particular. I don't know. I don't really want to change my body physically, but it would just be useful though. You know what I mean? If you forced me to try it somehow, I think I would say, but that's just so useful. Like, I'm not going to continue to protest because it's like weird or whatever. I'm the kind of person who would say, you know what? I guess it's worth it, right? Even though I'm here saying, don't change my body. I bet you that if I were to be given the opportunity to try with no stakes, I would probably just agree after trying it. So I don't know what that says, that I know that, but then I'm saying I don't want it. Dogs. So you could ask the dogs, do you want the ability to hold stuff? Our dogs can now talk, and we're trying to decide, well, it's much easier to treat the dogs as equals in our society if they can pick stuff up. I feel like that's the thing people would be focused on. They would say, well, you can't just be, the dogs are taking all our jobs and they can't even pick up their cup of coffee in the morning. I don't know. Like this, the people would say things like that. And so then the dog gets to say, do I want to have a tail that can be used quite similarly to a human hand or not? Well, I guess it's kind of not like a human hand. Okay, you know Apom, the Pokemon Apom, uh, not sponsored. Do I need to say that here? It's popular enough that it's like saying Coca-Cola not sponsored. I people know that. Apom, Aipom. I think you can look this up. It's a monkey, and the monkey's tail like is a hand, kind of like a baseball glove, but like a hand, very very much like digits and a hand, right? A grabber, a much more hand-like tail. I suppose you could do that. That's kind of terrifying, as I'm imagining it, but you could sort of do that. I don't know. I mean, I guess I just feel like you're saying distant future, Free William. I feel like if we have the ability to, and there are animals that make it through our various technological revolutions, and we humanity doesn't just like kill everyone, then the dogs with us like will be able to have any feature that would enable them to participate in our society that we want them to. So then what do? You see what I mean? And I think a lot of people, once they have a dog that is an intellectual and sort of agency equal, will want a pet that isn't like that. I think a lot of people don't know that what they want is a pet that actually doesn't have their own ability to do their own thing. And you know what, just briefly, I'm very judgmental of that type of thing, but I'd like to say I think that that has a place in some sense. It's okay to feel in control of things sometimes. You don't have to feel like you have no control and control is always bad, and you should never want to control anything at all times. That's no. Like if you're like me and have had therapists say like, well, you're male, so you automatically have control issues. And I say, but but I don't insist on. I don't know, man. Have you seen what I do for work? People send me prompts and then I talk for hours about I do have a lot of control over these. I'm mostly kidding, but the point I'm trying to make is that I think for a lot of people, the fulfilling thing is that they get control over the animal's situation. And you could do that with your generative AI pet. But anyway, you get the point. Briefly, I didn't touch at all on, it was a very human perspective. I didn't touch at all upon humans kill themselves in a nuclear war, but dogs survive, which I guess could happen. And then what will the dogs be like? For some reason, humans bioengineer dogs to be immune to radiation. That's not a thing, but you know what I mean. They figure out a way to have nanomachines repair their cells as they're damaged or something like that. Just leave me alone. This is the tough one to ask me because I don't know anything about any of this. And then for some reason, dogs live and humans die. Okay. And I didn't focus on that much because that perspective, you can't really escape. Like I can't use any human perspective to think about how humans might respond. And then that could be interesting. At that point, it's just what will dogs evolve to be like based on selection pressures and their phenotypes, and I don't know. Like I know nothing about that subject, so I don't know. Maybe it'll be cool. Back to wolves. I would think. Don't you think? Like the answer at that point is just back to how they were. Like or they won't change much. The sort of pack strategy is pretty effective. So for the most part, they like maybe it'll just work out. Another thing I'm kind of interested in is if humans have killed competitors in the biological niche to the point that dogs are actually stronger than they would have been otherwise. The channel Tier Zoo is kind of lurking in the background at the end of here. But that's all I've got, I think. Thank you for asking. I hope you had fun with the direction I took it in. Like that's what I have. I guess you knew what was going to happen with this one, right? Like I don't know that stuff. So go figure. It was fun to try to answer.